So, when you think about Canada, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably hockey, maybe saying sorry a lot, and that's all fair. But for anyone trying to do business there, the real Canada is this incredibly fascinating puzzle with all these layers of complexity hidden just under the surface. So, let's start putting some of those pieces together and see what picture we get.
Right off the bat, you run into these small but really crucial differences. In the US, you're dealing with a vendor, you get an estimate, and you mail it to a zip code. But literally, the moment you cross the border, you're working with a supplier who gives you a quote, and it's going to a postal code. Now, these seem tiny, right? But they're actually the very first clue that things are just different up there. And look, it's easy to just write this off as a spelling thing, like adding a U to color. But these little breadcrumbs, they point to something way, way deeper. The real differences are actually baked right into the legal and financial foundation of the country itself.
And this is where it gets really interesting. We're not talking about cultural quirks or simple preferences here. In a lot of cases, these differences aren't just suggestions. They are the law. They're legally mandated. You don't really get a choice in the matter. You just have to do it.
Okay, so let's peel back the first layer of this whole puzzle. And it is a big one, Quebec. This province operates under a completely unique set of language laws. And believe me, they have a huge impact on pretty much every single aspect of doing business. And just look at how deep this goes. We're talking about Quebec's Charter of the French language. It's not enough to just have a French version of your website. No. Your accounting software, your official chart of accounts, even your tax audits, all of it has to be available and actually conducted in French. This isn't just about translation anymore. It's a fundamental part of how you have to operate. All right, language laws, that's one thing. But now let's get to the topic that hits every single company's bottom line. Taxes. And this right here is where the Canadian puzzle really shows off its most complex and, honestly, most surprising feature. So just take a guess. Let's say you're a company and you want to sell your products all across Canada. How many different sales tax systems do you think you need to build into your software? One, maybe two tops? The answer is three. That's right, three. It's not one unified system. It's three totally separate frameworks, all operating at the same time, inside the same country. This really tells you everything you need to know about how decentralized Canada is. And this table breaks it all down. So first, you've got the HST provinces. Think Ontario, the Maritimes. They combine the federal and provincial tax into one. Pretty straightforward. Then you've got provinces like BC and Quebec that charge two separate taxes right on the same invoice, the federal GST and then a provincial sales tax. And finally, you have places like Alberta that have no provincial sales tax at all, just the federal GST. So that first system, it revolves around this key term HST, which stands for Harmonized Sales Tax. It's basically where the federal and provincial governments decided, hey, let's just merge our taxes into one. And for businesses in those places, it really does make life a whole lot simpler. One tax to charge, one tax to send in. And this chart really shows you the dramatic impact this has on the final price tag. I mean, look at this. In Alberta, the total tax is just 5%. Move over to Ontario, it jumps to 13%. And then in Quebec, it's this super specific 14.975%. If you're a national company, just managing these different rates and rules is a massive job. And just when you think you've got it, there's another wrinkle with Quebec. Its system is completely its own thing. While most provinces let the federal Canada Revenue Agency handle their taxes, Quebec's is run by its own separate agency, Revenue Quebec. It's truly a system within a system. So, we've talked about language, we've talked about taxes, but the differences, they go even deeper. I mean, right down to the fundamental rules of accounting, the rules that tell a business how to even report all those taxes in the first place. Here it is. This is probably the most fundamental truth for any American company thinking about expanding north. If you're an accountant trained in the US, you live and die by GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. But in Canada, that rulebook just doesn't apply. They've got their own thing going on. See, Canada uses this tailored, tiered approach. So all the publicly traded companies, they use the global IFRS standard. But the vast majority of private businesses, they use a special made-in-Canada standard called ASPE. And then nonprofits have their own set of rules too, called ASNPO. It's a much more segmented system. And get this, these different standards actually change the words you use. A big public company will talk about the depreciation of its property, plant, and equipment.
But a private Canadian company just across the street will call the exact same thing the amortization of its capital assets. Same concept, totally different language, and it's all dictated by these different rulebooks. Okay, wow, we have peeled back a lot of layers here. Language, tax, accounting. It's clearly a complicated environment. But here's why understanding all this is so important. It gives you a roadmap for how to actually get things done and succeed there.
You can't just tackle this randomly. The smart way, the strategic way, is to start with the single most complex piece of the puzzle, Quebec. Because if you can build a system that handles its dual language and dual tax requirements, then adapting it for the much simpler HST or PST provinces, that becomes way, way easier.
And, it's really important to see all this complexity not as a bug, but as a feature. It's the direct result of Canada's history, its political structure, where the provinces have a huge amount of power. These differences, they really reflect the unique identities and the autonomy of its regions. So we've seen how just one simple business document, an invoice, can unpack this entire world of legal, cultural, and financial difference. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If an invoice can tell a story this complex, what other fascinating details are we all missing just beneath the surface?